Hi everybody, welcome to another episode of Historia Politica Pública. This is the third and last episode about Mahatma Gandhi and his book Hinswara or Indian Home Rule. He published this book in 1908 in order to spread his message to the masses about the use of love, non-violence, passive resistance in order to attain the Hinswara, which was the Indian Home Rule. In the two previous episodes, I analyzed almost the whole book, going through different chapters such as what is Swaraj, the condition of England, why was India lost, or the use of brute force, or Italy and India. In this last episode, I want to analyze the chapter 17, which I think is the most powerful of the whole book. It is passive resistance, and obviously nowadays, when we hear the name of Gandhi, we always reminds his ideas of the use of non-violence, the spread of love in order to enhance the spirit of all the population, to create a mass movement in order to overthrow the tyrant and establish an egalitarian society. In that sense, he points in the preface of his book that a quote, if India adopt the doctrine of love as an active part of her religion and introduce it in her politics, Swaraj will descend upon India from heaven. This quote is very important because it combines two of the most significant ideas of Gandhi: the use of religion in order to spread his message, and also the power of love, as he called the love force or the soul force. This approach in order to change the current system in India, writing in 20th century, through the spirit of solidarity between all people. For that reason, he was very fearful that an Indian elite could attain the power once the British people would be overthrown from the government and the colony. In that sense, he was always insisting upon the idea that it would be necessary that everybody in India, the nation, would take a kind of important role within this change. In fact, in the last chapter of the book, when he's talking with the reader, remember this book is based on this kind of system between question and answer, between the editor and a reader. A reader is the kind of people who are asking Gandhi questions. He is the editor and he chooses his questions and answer because he saw some kind of concerns in an in an Indian newspaper in which people were far from being convinced about this approach propagated by Gandhi. In that sense, when the reader asked him, "What will you say to the nation?" and Gandhi replied, "Who is the nation?" This has reminiscence with the idea of Robespierre when he points that the people in Paris speak upon the name of the whole nation of France. But Gandhi wanted to be more specific. Who is the nation? In other episodes, in other chapters, he points that it didn't matter if the British or Indian would dominate the country, he will never submit under the yoke of a tyrant anymore. And in fact, he explained how if the British become Indianized, they will be part of the country. When he mentioned Indianized, refers to the pursuit of love in order to establish the new community. In that sense, the reader replied to Gandhi, "Okay, let's define the nation as those people who are eager to have home rule." And Gandhi replies, quote, "To this I will say, it is only those Indians who are imbued with real love who will be able to speak to the English in the above strain without being frightened, and only those can be said to be so imbued who consciously believe that Indian civilization is the best and that the European is a 9 days wonder." European, again, is related with the modern civilization that in the previous episode I point out how Gandhi despised the kind of forceful imposition of machinery within the different European societies, relating the creation of weapons, the seek of wars with other countries in order to conquer new territories as a kind of the epitome of evil within the modern time. So, In the chapter 17, which is called Passive Resistance, he's again clear about the power of love. He says, quote, "Love is the root. For him, it's a scientific truth. He points that as much as I believe in two and two being four, love is fundamental for the human nature. For that reason, which is the contrast of love, for him is war. In that sense, a nation with no wars is a happy nation. And the fact, as he said, that there are so many men still alive in the world shows that it is based not on the force of arms, but on the force of truth or love." This is very important because the reader asks Gandhi, okay, but if love is so important, why the world is such a miserable place, everybody hates each other and so on? And Gandhi replies very intelligently, well, this is not so. The problem is that because we have always studied history, and in history the things that are being written are the wars, the conflict, and so on, we humans believe that this is the normal state of the world. But on the contrary, there are much more people in the history that has lived a peaceful life, but this has not been written within the books of history. So reading this, it reminds me to the power of the media. When if you just stay at home one day watching TV, like let's say 1 hour, any kind of channel, you will think that the world is a very bad place to live in, that it doesn't make sense. There is death, killings, rapes, wars, and so on. But this is the idea that the media wants us to believe, because in that sense, we will be more afraid about what is happening. We will be more willing to submit ourselves to buy the advertising that they are selling into TV. Also, we will perhaps be more focused on what is happening, because let's say, imagine that you are seeing a program in which they are just recording a normal family life, which is fine, or a group of friends just having some good conversation. People perhaps won't be so interested about that. So sensationalism is what sells more. In that sense, the pseudo environment that the media is creating for us, as Walter Lippmann would said, makes us believe that the reality is as it is being shown by the books or by the TV, the radio, or the newspaper. So for that reason, Gandhi say, listen, don't believe in all that, because if the war or the conflicts will be the normal state of people, then we will be all dead. It doesn't make sense that there are so many people alive if in theory we're always killing each other. This is something that Gandhi wants to teach the people around, that traditionally the force of truth or love have imposed itself above the war and conflict. This doesn't mean that Gandhi is a kind of naive person who believes that there is just goodness upon the world. But he wants to point that we need to be aware that even though there is bad things happening in the world and we need to fight against those, we are on the majority to defeat these evils. So Gandhi, in that sense, sent a kind of message of optimism to the people. Like, listen, it's true that there is a lot of fights to be won by non-violence method, but passive resistance. However, don't despair. We are on the majority and we can win this. So, for him, apart from the tergiversation of history, the writing of this kind of sensationalist things happening, he points how, quote, law is another form of exhibition of brute force. In that sense, law is a not natural made kind of system. And this was said by Gandhi and also by William Blackstone. Emma Goldman quoted him in the book Anarchism and Other Heresies. William Blackstone is considered as the father of the legislation in England, and he points how there are human-made laws, which are the natures, and others which are legislation which are created to perpetuate a system of power within the elites. In that sense, brute force is the law for Gandhi. Also, Henry David Thoreau, who is one of the first also theories to kind of talk about that in his essay on the duty of civil disobedience, in which he points how we don't need to obey unjust laws. Gandhi says exactly the same. For Thoreau was the idea to refuse to pay taxes, because with his taxes and the people's taxes, the United States government was financing the war in Mexico and also the slavery. That was the 1840s. For Gandhi, we don't need to obey also unjust laws that are oppressing people, destroying the environment, killing the non-human animals, and overall imposing a kind of exploitative system, in that case in India. In the 1960s, many people in the US refused to pay taxes because they knew how this money was being used to keep the war in Vietnam. So the kind of dissidency to avoid contributing for that aim, it was hugely being debated during the 1960s. So what is passive resistance? For Thoreau and for Gandhi was the same. Gandhi said, quote, "If I do not obey the law and accept the penalty for its breach, I use full force." Thoreau didn't pay the taxes, went to jail, and accepted his punishment. Martin Luther King Jr. refused to be submitted under a white supremacist society, went to jail, and started writing there to spread his message against racism. Gandhi also was in prison for use passive resistance as Martin Luther King Jr. and Henry David Thoreau. And he said, "I accept the penalty and I use soul force." Soul force is the equal of love force and is passive resistance. What is that? For him, it is contrary to our manhood, obey laws repugnant to our consciousness. So the soul force must be used to combat this kind of law. In other words, Gandhi is against obeying laws that are unjust. He mentions the importance of uniting the body and the mind, training both, and this is very important because he says, okay, the soul force, the love force needs a kind of trained mind. But in order to have a mind which is able to kind of fight against the injustice, we need a training body, because he says, listen, if you really want to be there changing society, your body must be healthy. So you need to eat well, do exercise, going around, keep yourself active, because if your body decay, inevitably your mind will do the same, because body and mind are one and the same, are in the human being. So you cannot have a kind of sharp mind within a corrupted body. So it is important for him to train both the mind and the body. And just to finish the episode, he points that the 4 characteristics of passive resistance are chastity, poverty, truth, and be fearless. Here perhaps is a bit controversial, especially among the chastity thing. He rationalized the idea that if women or men fall upon their animal instincts, they won't be able to train their minds. So for that thing, his idea of chastity was important in his thought. Anyway, he doesn't forbid the right to have sex, because he speaks also about wife and husband and so on, but I think he was more for the idea of establishing a society in which sexual relations will be spread. Obviously, I am against that idea of Gandhi, because I don't think that giving impulses to our human animal instincts, as he called, is bad in itself. On the contrary, it helps you to develop your love for other people, and in that sense, having sexual relation with other people outside your, let's say, close circle, it is not prejudicial for the means. But Gandhi did not think so. About poverty, I know where he points, because for him, money is evil, or in other words, money is the god of the British, which are exploiting the Indians. So in that sense, it is important to refuse to the material means, and especially the kind of opulency that he saw in the elites of his society. The sake of the truth is the other quality, because it's fundamental and honest path in order to attain the final aims, and be fearless, not be afraid to the outcome, because for him, if you pursue the road of love, at the end you will establish an egalitarian and free society. And here I will finish with the analysis of Gandhi book. I think it's very interesting to read. It doesn't take that long. The kind of structure between question and answer, it makes a very stimulating reading. And I think one of the interesting things of Gandhi, apart from the most famous things that he was an advocating for passive resistance, the idea of uniting the nations to overthrow the colonizers, his socialist credentials, seeking equality upon everybody. Also, his knowledge about history and about the geopolitical situation at that time is very, very interesting, very insightful. We can delve more upon it. He knew very well the situation in Italy with Garibaldi and Mazzini. He mentioned how the conditions of every country was different. So in India, it was important to kind of push the idea of religion as a kind of mechanism to spread the ideas of peace, but also emphasize the idea that each country could have a different road. It was important to analyze the different conditions of each area of the world, but eventually there will be a common denominator in every part, and that will be, as the anarchist says, the power of love.